Hey everyone, and welcome to the deep dive. Get ready, because today we're going deep, deep into the, how can I put it, the creepier side of Icelandic folklore.
We're talking about the Yule Lads, right?
Yeah, the Yule Lads, and here's the thing, not those jolly guys leaving goodies and shoes. No, we're talking about their ancestors, the OG Yule Lads.
The forgotten ones.
Exactly, the forgotten Yule Lads. And trust me, these guys were the stuff of nightmares. We're talking way scarier than, like, Krampus.
Oh, definitely. These figures, they weren't messing around.
No, they weren't. So buckle up, folks. We've got ancient tales, illustrations, the whole shebang, ready to uncover the chilling origins of Iceland's forgotten Yule Lads.
Let's do it.
Okay, so first up, we've got this, well, he's called Meltaslicker, the grease licker. Imagine this. A skeletal figure lurking in your kitchen, licking the grease from your pots and pans.
Now, that's not exactly someone you want showing up for a holiday party.
No kidding. But, when you think about it, this whole grease-stealing thing, it takes on a whole new meaning when we remember how brutal Icelandic winters were.
Absolutely. Food scarcity was a constant threat. Every calorie, every ounce of fat was precious.
Exactly. So Meltis here, he's not just some creepy dude with a grease fetish, right?
Yeah.
He represents this deep-seated fear of losing those vital resources.
Right. He embodies that anxiety about survival.
Okay, so speaking of survival, or rather the opposite, let's talk about Skröggur.
Ah, yes, Skröggur. He's a whole other level of terrifying.
This guy, he's not into petty theft like our friend the grease licker.
No. Skröggur is like the embodiment of winter's destructive power. Imagine a raging blizzard, but in human form.
Oh, wow.
Toppling barns, scattering livestock, basically wreaking havoc wherever he goes.
Yikes. I mean, you've got the cold, the isolation, and then this guy shows up. That's just adding insult to injury.
Well, it's about more than just physical destruction, right? Skröggur represents the ever-present danger, the feeling of being at the mercy of forces beyond your control.
Okay, I see what you mean. And that sense of helplessness, it comes up again and again in these stories, like with, what was his name? Gata Jofur, the door thief.
Yeah, Gata Jofur. Now, he's an interesting one.
Stealing a door. I mean, of all things to steal, right?
In the middle of winter, no less.
Mm-hmm.
But think about it. The door, it's not just a hunk of wood. It represents security. A barrier between you and the elements.
Oh, I get it. Like a psychological thing, too.
Exactly. So to lose your door, especially in the dead of winter, it would be terrifying.
It'd be like losing that feeling of safety, of being protected.
And it highlights how vulnerable they were, how precarious their existence was.
Speaking of precarious, we got to talk about Flatnari, the fat sock stuffer. This guy, he's got a thing for, well, fat. Like, he ruins people's winter clothes by stuffing them with grease and butter.
Okay, so ruining your clothes, not exactly the scariest thing in the world. But again, context is everything.
Right. We're talking about a time when warm clothing wasn't a fashion choice. It was a matter of life and death.
Losing those vital garments, especially to something as, let's say, avoidable as grease damage, would have been a huge blow.
And it's not like they could just, order a new parka on their phones.
Exactly. It really puts into perspective just how vulnerable they must have felt, constantly aware of how easily things could go wrong.
So it's this theme of scarcity, this constant threat of winter that permeates so many of these Yule Lad stories, even with Funniskafa, the snow shoveler.
Oh, Funniskafa. He might sound somewhat harmless at first.
Yeah, like, oh no, not more snow shoveling.
Right. But imagine waking up after a blizzard to find your door completely blocked, barricaded by snow. You're trapped, isolated, unable to reach your supplies or livestock. And then you realize it wasn't just the wind and snow, it was Funniskafa.
He buried you alive, essentially. Talk about a passive-aggressive way to mess with someone. But again, it's that feeling of being targeted by something unseen, something you can't control.
Exactly, and that's where the real fear seeps in. It's that unease, that sense of being watched, of being toyed with by forces beyond your understanding.
Okay, so we've got the grease slicker, the door thief, the snow shoveler, and how could we forget about Skröggur, the sweat crow?
Ah, Skröggur, the collector of sweaty garments.
I mean, what is it with these guys in clothes?
It might seem strange, but remember, clothing was incredibly valuable back then. A good, warm garment could be the difference between life and death.
Okay, so stealing clothes, that tracks, but why sweaty clothes?
Well, it's not entirely clear. Maybe he was just drawn to the aroma. But regardless, the underlying message is clear. Even the most basic necessities, the things you rely on for survival, could be taken from you at any moment.
Talk about anxiety-inducing. It makes you realize how different their world was, how precarious their existence was compared to ours.
Absolutely. But, it wasn't all doom and gloom with these Yule Lads.
Oh, tell me more about that.
Yeah, there were a few who, while still mischievous, weren't quite as, shall we say, existentially terrifying.
Okay, that's a relief. Who are we talking about? Give me some hope here.
For instance, there's Faldefakert, the skirt blower.
The skirt blower, what does he do? Like, go around blowing up skirts?
Pretty much. Picture this. You're bundled up against the cold, and suddenly a phantom gust of wind sends your skirt flying.
Oh, no. That's so embarrassing. Although, I guess if it's a phantom gust, no one would know who to blame, right?
Exactly. So, a bit of harmless fun, a little bit of gossip fodder, even in the depths of winter.
Okay, so maybe not all the Yule Lads were out to traumatize the entire population.
Precisely. These stories weren't always meant to terrify. Sometimes they were just a way to inject a bit of humor, a dash of the unexpected, into what was probably a pretty monotonous and challenging season.
Yeah, I can see that, but I have a feeling we're not done with the terrifying ones just yet, are we?
Oh, definitely not. There are still plenty of Yule Lads whose main goal seems to have been chaos and disruption.
Okay, hit me with it. Who else do we have?
Well, for starters, there's Hleypidolgur, the running pest. Imagine a one-man hurricane tearing through villages, causing mayhem wherever he goes.
Oh, no.
Livestock scattering, carts overturning, shutters banging, just pure chaos.
It's like those sudden storms that can whip up out of nowhere, right? One minute everything's calm, the next, all hell's breaking loose.
That's a great way to put it. He's like the embodiment of that unpredictability, that raw, untamed power of nature.
A constant reminder that no matter how prepared you think you are, nature can always throw you a curveball. Or, in this case, a Hleypidolgur. And we're back with the deep dive, folks. Still trekking through this winter wonderland of Icelandic folklore. But here's the thing that's been on my mind.
What's that?
We've been talking about these, seriously intense Yule Lads, right? These harbingers of doom and gloom. But the Yule Lads we know today, I mean, they're practically, holiday mascots.
It's quite a transformation, isn't it?
Total image makeover. So how do we get from, I'm going to steal your door and bury you alive in snow, to leaving treats and shoes?
Well, our sources suggest a few key factors at play. One is, of course, modernization. As Iceland transitioned away from a primarily rural, subsistence-based society.
Meaning they weren't as reliant on, what they could grow and gather themselves anymore.
Exactly. So naturally, those primal fears associated with winter's wrath, they started to fade a bit.
Makes sense. Hard to be too worried about a door thief when you've got, central heating and a well-stocked pantry.
Precisely. As those immediate threats to survival became less pressing, so did the need for those really stark cautionary tales.
Okay, but we still tell scary stories, right? Even if we don't have to worry about, freezing to death or whatever. So it's got to be more than just practicality.
Oh, absolutely. There's also the element of, cultural transmission. As societies change, the stories they tell also change to reflect new values, new anxieties.
So like a cultural game of telephone. Each generation puts their own spin on things.
Exactly. And somewhere along the way, someone decided that maybe the grease liquor was a bit much for the kiddos. Time for a Yule Lad rebrand.
Time to make them more kid-friendly.
Well, it's more than just that. Stories, folklore, they often serve to reinforce societal norms. And as those norms shift, so do the narratives. Think about the messages we send with the modern Yule Lads. Generosity, kindness, a little bit of harmless mischief.
Instead of, sweat stealing and door napping.
Right.
It's kind of wild, though, when you think about it. These figures went from, the embodiment of fear and hardship to, well, almost cuddly.
It really speaks to the adaptability of folklore, its ability to reflect our changing relationship with the world around us. And it's not unique to Iceland. We see this in other cultures, too.
Oh, yeah. Like what? Give me an example.
Take Krampus, for example.
Oh, right. Krampus.
He was this terrifying figure in Central European folklore, basically the anti-Santa. If you were a bad kid, Krampus was coming for you. But now he's become this, holiday icon.
Totally. Krampus on Christmas sweaters. Who knew a demon goat could be so trendy?
It's a perfect example of how ancient figures can be reinterpreted, even embraced, within a modern context.
Okay, but that whole thing about fear evolving, you've really got me thinking. Have we really conquered our fears, or have they just shape-shifted into something new.
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Because it's like, yeah, we might not have to worry about, surviving a harsh winter anymore.
Or at least not in the same way.
Right, exactly. But that doesn't mean our anxieties have disappeared, right? They've just, I don't know, evolved alongside us. Like, we don't have to worry about a grease licker stealing our, butter and stuff, but we've got, like, data breaches and identity theft.
Oh, absolutely. It's those same underlying anxieties, just, updated for the digital age.
So instead of our doors being barricaded by snow, it's our social media feeds, all curated and controlled by algorithms.
Trapped in our own little echo chambers.
Right. And then instead of the lung crusher going after our livestock, it's like this pressure to be productive 24/7, like always on, always hustling.
Yeah.
The productivity vampire. I love that. Right. It's like this constant drain on your time and energy. It makes you wonder, though, if we took those original Yule Lads, those embodiments of fear from, centuries ago, and dropped them into our modern world, what kind of creatures would they come up with to represent our anxieties today?
Oh, that's a fantastic question. What would a 21st century Yule Lad look like? I mean, we've got the doom-scrolling demon, the climate change kraken. The possibilities are endless.
Right. It really makes you think.
But, as much as we like to poke fun at these fears, it's important to remember that fear in itself isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's a natural human emotion.
Okay, yeah, that's true.
It's what we do with that fear that matters. Do we let it paralyze us, or do we use it as fuel for, positive change?
That's a great point.
And I think the stories of the Yule Lads, even the scary ones, ultimately remind us that we have the power to confront our fears, to find ways to cope and adapt and even, laugh about them sometimes.
I like that. Turning fear into, well, maybe not laughter, but at least something we can manage.
Exactly. Because the world can be a scary place no matter what century you're living in. But we're not powerless. We have each other, we have our stories, and we have our resilience.
Well said. And on that note, we've reached the end of our deep dive into the world of Iceland's forgotten Yule Lads. Hope you all enjoyed the journey.
It's been a pleasure, as always.
And remember, folks, if you had to invent a Yule Lad to represent our modern anxieties, what would it be? Let us know. Until next time, keep exploring, stay curious, and don't let the sweat crow steal your favorite sweater.